Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me thank Mayor de Blasio for that introduction. It is very hard to follow an introduction like that because anything I say will clearly not reach the level that you are now expecting. So, but I want to thank Mayor de Blasio for the introduction and also thank him for the work that he's doing as mayor. It ain't an easy job being mayor. I was a mayor for 8 years. And I want to especially applaud him on an issue that we worked in Burlington when I was mayor, and that is the absolute unacceptable crisis that we have in this country in terms of child care and pre-K education. This is not a sexy issue. It is not talked about very much, but it is of enormous consequence. We have all over this country, the overwhelming majority of working families, mom is working, dad is working, and kids, the little ones, the future of this country, are not getting the quality child care and pre-K that they need. We are going to change that. And here in New York City, you are leading that effort. Congratulations. And I want to congratulate journalist Juan Gonzalez. We all know what work Juan has done over the years. And I also want to congratulate one of your honorees tonight, and that is a very dear friend of mine, somebody who I've gotten to know very, very well over the last year, former state senator from Ohio, Nina Turner. And I was so proud that in our campaign, Nina was out there all over this country. And what Nina talks about is heart, soul. You know, it's not just ideas, it is feelings, it is passion, it is a connection with the people. And Nina has been doing that her whole life, and I thank her so much for her efforts during the campaign. And I want to thank Bob Master and Heather McGee and Danny Cantor and Karen Scharf, Bill Lipton and Katrina Vanden Heuvel, and the members of the Communication Workers of America. Thank you for your support. The New York State Nurses Association, the Transit Workers, the Amalgamated Transit Union, Citizen Action of New York, and all the other WFP members and leaders who supported our campaign. And I want to thank the Working Families Party for a number of reasons. What you are doing is showing the significance and the effectiveness of independent politics. You are involving tens of thousands of working people in getting them to stand up and fight for their rights, in getting working people to understand that at the end of the day, nobody does it for you. You're going to have to stand up and fight and lead the struggle yourself. All of us, I suspect, are in agreement that the election of Donald Trump would be an embarrassment and a disaster for this country. And I say that not just because Trump wants to give incredibly large, I was going to say huge, but I won't. I don't use that word anymore. tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country. And it's not just, and this is incredibly frightening and would be awful, is that you have a candidate running for president who is rejecting science, which is how we make public policy, and ignoring the fact that climate change is real. It is already causing havoc in our country and around the world. And if we don't get our act together, and this planet keeps warming, the planet that we're going to be leaving to our children and our grandchildren may very well be uninhabitable. And you got this guy going around saying, more oil, more carbon. How destructive is that? But on top of all of that, the reason that I am most impassioned in doing everything that I can do to defeat Trump is that he is running his campaign based on bigotry. Based on bigotry. And I don't have to remind anybody in this room, you all know this stuff as well or better than I do, how many hundreds of years we have struggled in this country to try to combat racism and discrimination. From the days when the first settlers came here and the terrible things that were done to those who were here first, the Native Americans, to slavery, to racism, to discrimination against the Irish, the Italians, the Jews. We have been fighting this and fighting this. And we have some successes. We made some real gains in recent years. And the idea that we would elect a president who would tear us apart, who would have us hate Muslims or hate Mexicans or disparage women or veterans, that is not the country that we will allow Trump to create. And I would hope that those folks here in New York who support Secretary Clinton will do so on the Working Families Party. That would be I think Bill de Blasio made the point that what our campaign was about was not just changing the conversation. It was making the point that when we stand together and have the guts to take on the billionaire class, there is, in fact, nothing that we cannot accomplish. Our major crisis is not poverty, it's not inequality, it is not climate change, it is not racism or sexism. Our major crisis is the establishment, and all of the systems of the establishment have told us to think small, to limit our imagination as to what we can accomplish. That's the major crisis we have got to overcome. A few blocks away from here on Wall Street, you have large financial institutions that make billions and billions of dollars a year in profit. And also a few blocks away from here, we have children who are living in poverty. We have more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth. And my main point tonight to you is, do not let anybody tell you that we cannot transform this country and create a decent and good quality life for every man, woman, and child. We certainly can. But to do that in a very loud and clear voice, we are going to tell the billionaire class their greed is destroying this country. We will not allow that to continue. We have children living in poverty. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth, over 20%. Few blocks away from here, you got elderly people, 75, 80 years of age, cutting their prescription pills in half because they cannot afford the medicine they need, living on $12,000, $13,000 a year Social Security. But in the last 16 years, we have seen an increase in the number of billionaires in America tenfold. 10 times as many billionaires today as was the case in the year 2000. Listen to this. 2000, you had 51 billionaires. Today, you got 540 billionaires. And they want more. And we are telling them tonight, you ain't going to get more. The children are, the working people, the seniors are, not you. And just now, just to give you an example, I think some of you may have heard, Wells Fargo, one of the major financial institutions in this country, just concocted a whole fraudulent operation. Their fine was a mere $185 million for ripping off people, and I will be very surprised if any of them go to jail, and that is an issue we are going to be working on. But what we are looking at Wall Street, Wells Fargo is not the exception to the rule. It goes on every day. Every day. Wall Street is based on fraud. And we have got to break up those huge financial institutions. And when we think big and not small, we ask ourselves a very simple question. How does it happen that of all the major countries on earth, we are living in the only major country not to guarantee health care to all people as a right? This is not a tough issue. This is not a tough issue. I live in Burlington, Vermont, 50 miles away from the Canadian border. They've been guaranteeing health care to their people for decades under conservative governments and liberal governments all over the world. People cannot understand how in the United States of America we continue to have 28 million people uninsured and even more underinsured with high deductibles and high copayments. Brothers and sisters, the time is coming when health care will be a right for all of our people, not a privilege. The time will come. The time will come sooner than later. We're going to make it sooner. When every American has the right and will be able to walk into a doctor's office and get the health care they need when they need it. And the time is going to come sooner than later when the bloody drug companies are not going to continue to rip us off. And when we think big, we ask ourselves, how does it happen that in the United States, we used to have the most cutting-edge infrastructure in the world? Our roads, our bridges, our water systems, our wastewater plants led the world. No longer the case. All over this country, we're seeing our water systems in collapse. I was in Flint, Michigan, and what I saw there was beyond belief. Children being poisoned through lead in the water. Water problems all over this country. Wastewater plants, roads, bridges in decay, airports, rail system way behind many other countries. This is not a country in the United States where we should be trailing other nations. We have got to rebuild our infrastructure, and when we do that, we create millions of decent paying jobs. That's what we got to do. This is a country where today we have millions of people working for starvation wages. And I want to congratulate the Working Families Party for leading the effort here in New York State for the $15 an hour minimum wage. When 58% of all new income generated today goes to the top 1%, do not tell me that we cannot create a country in which all of our workers are earning at least a living wage. And the living wage is tied directly into the crisis we face in terms of criminal justice. We have a criminal justice system which is broken, and together we are going to bring about major reforms. We will not tolerate unarmed African Americans or anybody else getting killed while they are in police custody or under arrest process. And we will not tolerate a situation where in cities and communities all over this country, youth unemployment is 30, 40%. Instead of building more jails, we're going to build more schools. Instead of spending $80 billion a year locking up fellow Americans, we're going to use that money to invest in good jobs and job training for the young people. We live in a highly competitive global economy. The world is rapidly changing. Technology is changing. We need the best educated workforce in the world. What we have right now is a situation, and I saw this all over this country, where people are leaving school or graduate school $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 in debt and are spending years paying off of that debt. That is insane. That's right, and I understand there is a movement right now to bring back free tuition. You know, look, this is not a hard issue to comprehend. 50 years ago, it may have made sense to say that public education was kindergarten or first grade through 12th grade. That was a great advance. The world has changed. And today, when we talk about public education or education in general, what we must be talking about is making public colleges and universities tuition-free. And we have got to deal with the real crisis that we're currently experiencing in student debt. Anybody here with student debt? All right. Now, I want you to think about it. I want you to think about it for a second. If we need, as we do, the best educated workforce in the world, if we need great engineers and scientists and teachers and business people, if we need the best educated workforce in the world, why are we punishing people for doing the right thing and trying to get that education? Now, I have no doubt that in terms of making public colleges and universities tuition free, that day is going to come. Let us make that day sooner rather than later. And when we talk about the great issues of our time, I think we are all sensitive to the reality that there are 11 million undocumented people in this country. And I've had, in the course of my campaign, the privilege of meeting so many wonderful people who are working so hard, who came into this country to improve their lives, as my father did, who came into this country to make sure that their kids could have a decent life, a safe life. Some of the communities where they came from, Guatemala, Honduras, horrible crime, violence, people getting killed every day. That's how they came and why they came to this country. And we owe it to them, and we owe it to everybody, to pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship. And when we talk about the greed of the big money interest, when we talk about the fact that the people on top, right now, as we speak, in this election season, the Koch brothers and a handful of other billionaires are attempting to buy the United States Congress, attempting to do it right now. I'm going to be in Ohio in a couple of days. They will probably end up spending, in a moderate-sized state, $100 million to elect their candidate who will represent the wealthy and the powerful. And if anyone here thinks that we can make progress on education, make progress on health care, make progress on the environment without addressing the crisis of campaign finance reform, I would have to tell you, you are mistaken. Citizens United will go down in history as one of the worst decisions ever made by United States Supreme Court, and together we are going to overturn Citizens United. Secretary Clinton said that she will not appoint a justice or nominate a justice to the Supreme Court who is not public about his or her willingness to overturn Citizens United, and that is exactly what has to happen. So I come before you tonight, having run a campaign for over a year, and I come before you far more optimistic than when I began that campaign, because in the course of the campaign, going through 46 states, I saw so much beauty, so much decency in the people who are out there. And this is not just rhetoric, this is the truth. People who understand that in the year 2016, we will not accept bigotry and racism. People who understand that as a nation, it is not acceptable that so few have so much and so many have so little. People who understand that we have a moral responsibility to combat climate change and transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. People who understand that we will not accept women getting paid 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. So what the political revolution is about is throwing off all of the limits to our imagination that CNN and CBS put on the air every single day. The choices they give us, the options they give us, are no longer acceptable. In the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we have the capabilities of doing unbelievable and extraordinary things. We do not need to have 46 million people living in poverty. We do not need to have in New York City and all over this country, in Burlington, Vermont, low-income people paying 50% of their income for housing because we don't have enough affordable housing. Elections come and go, but the struggle for justice continues. And I want everybody, I want to conclude on this note because I want you all to remember this. Think about the struggle of workers 100, 120 years ago. Think about the children who are working in factories and in the fields who are losing their fingers and hands because they were 10 years old working in factories when they should have been in school. But people stood up by the millions and fought back and helped create the American trade union movement, which has given us the middle class. And I thank all the brothers and sisters in that movement. And think about the struggles that have taken place in this country to end racism and segregation, and how many people died and went to jail and were lynched and were beaten because they demanded an America not based on racism. That did not happen overnight. Didn't happen overnight, and people didn't say, well, we had a setback yesterday, I'm giving up. They continued the struggle, and we're continuing that struggle today. And think, because the children don't know this. Think about the fact that 100 years ago today, women in America did not have the right to vote. And women stood up and said, that's not what this country is going to be about. And think a few blocks away from here, when people got beaten because they were gay, and they said, enough is enough. So we have made progress in a number of areas. But brothers and sisters, we have yet the major fight in front of us, and that is the economic struggle. The struggle to tell a handful of people that they cannot continue to control our economy, our political life, and our media. And that is what the Working Families Party is about. That's what we're all about. So I look forward first to thank you for all your help in my campaign. And second of all, to tell you from the bottom of my heart, the revolution continues. Thank you all.